Thank you. Thank you. So, look, thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Really excited to talk about Google's Core Web Vitals, and really, why this matters for brand marketers who oftentimes don't need to engage with this type of technical area. So, I think it's a really interesting topic. I think that a lot of the marketers that I work with on a regular basis, they sort of know that website usability, that accessibility, that performance, they know these issues matter. But actually engaging with these things as a brand marketing team can be really challenging because it's a whole knowledge barrier, and not everyone can just be a webmaster. With Google's new Core Web Vitals framework that they've launched, they've now taken this really complicated area, kind of boiled it down to 3 key areas to focus on, and as a result made performance, usability, these website details that are oftentimes the domain of webmasters. They've made it accessible to brand marketers who can finally give it the due that it deserves. So today, to dive into this, we have primarily we have 2 of us. So primarily, you're going to hear from Joe Hoyle, who's a brilliant website optimization expert and a principal consultant in our UK office. I'm James Campbell. I lead digital analytics, DX analytics in North America, and I'm coming to you from New York City. And as a brief bit of context before we dive into the topic at hand, in case you haven't heard of us, DX Analytics is a team at Kantar that focuses on creative applications, digital data for all different types of marketers' questions. And one of the areas that we spend a lot of time on is in the measurement and the optimization and the strategic development of brand websites, whether that's for information purposes, for usability, for accessibility, and of course, for direct-to-consumer e-commerce as well. And today's session on Core Web Vitals really sits in that website optimization space, how brand managers can really optimize their websites to, from a technical perspective. And I'm going to hand over to Joe to dive into it.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. In this session, we're going to cover what Core Web Vitals are, why they're important, and how a site passes. We'll explain why Google created these new performance measures, and we'll dive into the business case for meeting Google's targets. Not everyone is optimizing for Core Web Vitals, so we'll give our perspective on why we think this is so. If you want to audit your website performance and that of your competitors, we'll explain how Kantar can help. And we'll cover our recommended optimization process, common optimization techniques, and we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and questions. So let's kick off by explaining why Core Web Vitals are a thing worth talking about. They're a new set of metrics from Google designed to evaluate how real users on real devices experience a web page. Google rolled them out as a ranking factor between June the 15th and the end of August this year. Your site's performance for the new metrics now affects your visibility in Google search. The new measures will also affect how your teams approach designing and developing your website. They help break down the user experience into distinct chunks, so site owners can identify and fix technical issues across their websites in an efficient and methodical way. And Core Web Vitals are about more than just ranking. Slow loading pages with poor user experience cause higher bounce rates, lower engagement, and lower conversion. And this affects brand perception and revenue generation. So let's take a look at the metrics that comprise Core Web Vitals. They're an extension of Google's page experience signals that were previously limited to criteria like mobile friendliness and a page's use of the HTTPS protocol. Core Web Vitals are comprised of 3 new performance measures. These are largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift, and each focuses on a different aspect of the user experience. Each metric has an associated target threshold, which categorizes performance as either good, needs improvement, or poor. Largest contentful paint, or LCP, is classified as good if the largest element on a page is painted to the screen in 2.5 seconds or less, irrespective of device type. LCP measures perceived load speed, and it marks the point during page load when the main content has likely loaded. Fast LCP helps reassure the user that a page is useful, and it's measured in seconds. FID measures page responsiveness. It measures the time for when a user first interacts with a page, for example, when they click a link or tap on a button, to the time when the browser is actually able to stop processing and begin responding to their interaction. A low FID helps ensure a page is responsive and usable, and it's measured in milliseconds. FID is classified as good if the delay in responding to user input lasts less than 100 milliseconds. CLS measures visual stability and helps quantify how often users experience unexpected layout shifts. A low CLS helps ensure that a page is stable, and it's measured as a score. CLS is classified as good if the score is 0.1 or less. In the example here, a page appears to have loaded and a user decides to click on an orange button, but the page continues to load and an image appears which shifts the button further down the page. The user ends up clicking the image by mistake because of the layout shift. Now, Google only measures unexpected layout shifts. It does not measure those that happen as a result of user input. So, for example, when a user opens an accordion to expose hidden content. So, how does a site pass Core Web Vitals? A page or site passes Google's assessment if the 75th percentiles of real user experience for all three metrics are classified as good. Otherwise, the page or the site does not pass. Now, Google's announced that it will aim to be as granular as possible in its assessment of pages. However, dependent on how much data it holds on a site and how well it can analyze the structure of a site, it may resort to aggregating scores to groups of pages that it considers similar, or the site as a whole. So, how do you check the performance of a site? Well, there are lots of tools you can use, but the easiest for the non-technical are Google Search Console, PageSpeed Insights, and the Web Vitals extension. If you've got access to a Google Search Console account, just go to the Core Web Vitals report to find which URLs on your site fall into the categories good, needs improvement, or poor. If you don't have access to an account, you could use Google's PageSpeed Insights web app at the address shown here. By default, PageSpeed Insights will report on the performance of the specific URL you enter into the app. To see the performance of a whole domain, tick the option Show Origin Summary. To view page performance as you browse the web, add the Web Vitals extension to your Chrome browser. Google's gone to great effort in developing these measures, but why? Basically, because users care about site speed. It's not enough that your site might look good, be easy to use and secure. Users are impatient. They'll bounce if they have to wait too long for a page to load. Google knows that speed matters. It's the foundation of a good user experience. Research by Google revealed that 53% of visits are abandoned if a mobile site takes longer than 3 seconds to load. 46% of consumers say that waiting for pages to load is what they dislike most about browsing the mobile web. And 89% of people are likely to recommend a brand after a positive experience on mobile. Core Web Vitals were created to help Google and site owners measure and improve user experience. Google's aim is that this will contribute to business success as users grow more engaged and can transact with less friction. Let's take a deeper dive into the business case for optimization. Core Web Vitals are now ranking factors in Google search. So improving your Core Web Vitals scores will increase your organic search traffic and visibility in search. Brands with weaker Core Web Vitals scores than their competitors will have to pay more per click in paid search advertising, and brands will most likely have to negate the negative impact on organic search traffic by spending more on search advertising. And websites with strong core web vital performance will have stronger user experiences and better conversion rates as a result. Optimizing for core web vitals affects more than just search ranking. There's an extensive body of research that supports this. Vodafone improved their largest contentful paint by 31%, and this resulted in an 8% increase in sales, a 15% increase in their lead to visit rate, and an 11% increase in their cart to visit rate. French e-commerce website Cdiscount improved all three core web vital metrics, which contributed to a 6% revenue uplift in their Black Friday sale. And Google found that when a site meets the recommended thresholds for core web vitals, users are at least 24% less likely to abandon a page before it finishes loading. For a year, Kantar Site Speed Practice monitored the performance of 100 of the most visited websites by mobile users in the UK, and this was across 10 industry verticals. Our findings revealed that in June 2020, shortly after Google announced it intended to make core web vitals the ranking signal, only 14% of the top 100 websites passed. By June 2021, when Google started to roll out the ranking algorithm change, the number of sites that passed had increased to only 22%. This chart shows how the 100 most visited brands across 10 different industries performed for core web vitals in June 2020 compared with 2021. Looking at sites in the categories supermarkets, travel and accommodation, and vehicles, not a single site passed core web vitals in June this year. This slide shows overall performance at a metric level. For nearly all brands, first input delay is not an issue, but the majority have work to do to improve on the other metrics. So, key takeaways from our study are: too many big brands have still not optimized their sites to meet core web vitals. Majority of brands need to focus on improving largest contentful paint and cumulative layout shift. Competitive advantage is likely to be gained by those brands that act to get in line with Google's update. And brands could experience volatility in search results if major competitors and second-tier players capitalize on the algorithm update and benefit from a rankings boost. And something to look out for is we plan to follow up with attendees of this webinar by sharing the findings of our study. So, if core web vitals are so important, why are so many brands not optimized to meet Google targets? Well, optimizing a website is not an easy thing to do. The first challenge is awareness. A lot of businesses don't know if their speed is good or bad, they don't know how fast their site is, and don't know how fast it should be. A lot of businesses aren't even aware that speed is important. The second barrier is insight. Businesses tend to have no understanding of the relationship between speed, user engagement, brand perception, and conversion, and have no idea how site speed is impacting their bottom line. Complexity is another problem. The things that cause poor site speed can lie anywhere in millions of lines of code, in the speed of your back-end infrastructure, or your content delivery network. Identifying problems and knowing what solution to put in place are significant challenges. And even when you found a problem, you then have to identify the team responsible for fixing it. And when faced with multiple issues, how do you prioritize which issues to fix first? This is where Kantar Site Speed Practice can help. We have experience and expertise in site speed optimization. We can tailor our services to meet your needs, but in general, our work tends to fall into one of three categories. When we first engage with clients, they tend to request a performance health check, in which we analyze how websites perform in the wild, for real users, and in the lab under controlled conditions. This is often followed by a deep dive in which we detect what is causing poor performance and identify where optimizations can be made. We also work with clients at a more strategic level to develop a performance monitoring strategy. which includes process, methods, and targets to help prevent performance regressions going forward. I thought it might be helpful to present a case study which exemplifies some of the complexity involved in analyzing performance and the unique insights that we can provide. One of our clients came to us with a simple question. Across our global markets, how do our websites perform for Core Web Vitals compared with our competitors? It's a sensible question to ask, but it couldn't be answered using any of Google's standard performance analysis tools. To analyze site performance, Google uses data held in its private view of what is known as CRUX, the Chrome User Experience Report. Data in CRUX is derived from real users of the Chrome browser on real devices visiting millions of websites. These are users who've opted in to sharing their browsing data anonymously. It is possible to analyze the performance of your website and that of competitor sites via a number of Google tools that use CRUX as a data source. But these tools have a key limitation. They either aggregate data at the domain level or reveal performance for single URLs. They do not provide access to data at the directory level. They provide data for example.com, but not for example.com/US. We overcome this issue by interrogating Google's CRUX dataset directly, so we're able to provide clients with competitor analysis segmented by market, device, and individual Core Web Vitals metric. Here you can see sample tables from the report we created for our global healthcare client. The report covered multiple global markets, competitor domains, and different device types. Company names and website addresses have been redacted. The table on the left covers Core Web Vitals and shows RAG-rated performance for mobile users in the US. These findings enabled our client to make an informed decision on where to focus optimization efforts. We armed them with insight into which domains, in which markets passed or failed, on what device type, and to what degree each metric was failing to meet target. We also analyzed the performance of client and competitor homepages under control conditions for a bunch of user-centric metrics. This is known as synthetic or lab testing. In addition to measuring performance in the wild, it's really important to compare performance under strictly controlled conditions using the same connection speed and device to robustly benchmark your site with that of competitors. So how do you go about optimizing for Core Web Vitals? Our recommended approach revolves around a 10-step process. First of all, commission or conduct an audit of your site to help you understand how your site meets Core Web Vital targets for users in specific markets, across different device types, and how your site compares with the performance of competitor sites. Use the findings of the audit to identify where to focus optimization efforts. Prioritize your most important markets with the poorest performance first. For each market that you target, use the Core Web Vitals report in Google Search Console to drill down and identify pages that require optimization. Fix everything labeled poor first. Prioritize optimization work either by issues that affect the most URLs or by issues that affect your most important popular URLs. And commission specialist support if required to ensure your development team understand the common causes of Core Web Vital failure, when and how to use a variety of diagnostic tools, best practice for running lab testing, and how to optimize for each individual Core Web Vitals metric. Perform lab testing using a combination of tools like Web Page Test, Lighthouse, and Chrome DevTools to identify the specific issues that are causing poor performance. Plan a program of optimization based on diagnostic findings from the lab testing. Test the same pages under the same conditions in production before and after optimization to measure and confirm any performance improvement. And when an issue is fixed, verify fixes via use of start tracking in Google's Search Console. This will trigger the start of a 28-day monitoring session to check for instances of the issues in your site. And if Search Console flags the issues as not fixed, investigate again and fix. There are many ways to optimize a website, and here I've listed the most common. I don't expect everyone to know what all of these optimization techniques are, but your development team should be familiar with the majority. The list serves to show that there's a lot that can impact the speed and usability of your site. And I've highlighted those that are primarily responsible for affecting core web vitals. But all of these optimization techniques impact performance in some way. And don't worry about taking a screen grab of this because we are recording this session. So let's round off with our key takeaways. Core Web Vitals are a new industry standard way to measure the performance of web pages for real users on real devices. They're an excellent indicator of user experience, and the new benchmarks can be used as concrete quality assurance targets. Core Web Vitals are now a ranking signal in Google search. Ignoring them is a risk to any business that uses a website to connect and transact with customers. Optimizing to meet Core Web Vitals targets should be a priority for any owner of a site with less than good performance. Core Web Vitals and site speed in general affect more than search ranking. Research shows that slow loading pages with poor user experience cause higher bounce rates, lower engagement, and lower conversion. The bottom line is that this affects revenue. And follow our recommended process. Audit your site and take ameliorative action to fix issues that affect Core Web Vitals performance. Too many sites still fail Core Web Vitals. In the current digital landscape, optimizing can lead to competitive advantage. And Google's focus on the quality of user experience is not going away. Google has said that it will most likely extend the range of measures that comprise Core Web Vitals and is considering use of a visual indicator in search results to highlight pages that meet all of the page experience criteria. We will shortly move on to questions, but I'll just leave on screen contact details for James and I, should you wish to follow up.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this very interesting, informative presentation. We do have a few questions coming in. Okay, so here we go. So we have quite a few actually. So let's start with this one. Google recently changed the way it calculates cumulative layout shift. Can you explain the new method? James, Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, previously, cumulative layout shift would it actually measured the sum total of all individual layout shift scores that occurred during a visit to a page. Problem was, this unfairly penalized long-lived pages. So those which the user generally has open for a long time. And there are several different types of pages which tend to stay open longer. And these are social media apps with infinite scroll and single page applications. Now, to overcome this, Google now calculates cumulative layout shift based on only the largest burst of layout shift scores. So I'll explain this slowly because it's a little complex, but a burst of layout shifts is known as a session window. And it's when one or more individual layout shifts occur in rapid succession with less than 1 second in between each shift, and a maximum of 5 seconds for the total window duration. And the largest burst is the session window with a maximum cumulative layout score. So to summarize, previously, in your visit to a page for the whole lifetime of the page. As you interacted, you scrolled up and down, it calculated all the layout shifts and gave you a score. Now it only calculates those that are in what it classes as a session window, and so those that occur within 1 second of each other, with a maximum window time of up to 5 seconds. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So here we have another question from Lisa. Can you clarify interactility? Is it time to click and get a response?
Yes. So I presume you're talking about first input delay. There are a range of measures that you can use to assess a site, and it's quite similar. There's time to interactive, there is total blocking time, which all and first input delay, and they all relate to essentially the amount of time that the web page spends processing and not really reacting to user input. So with first input delay, Google measures only the first time that the user interacts with the page, because this is really important, because users might visit somewhere else if a page takes too long to load and interact. So it measures the time that the user interacts and the time that the page is actually able to respond to that interaction. So it's stopped processing JavaScript or doing some other activity and can actually respond to the user input. And to get a good score, you need to do that within 100 milliseconds. And often if pages load a lot of JavaScript, use a lot of JavaScript libraries, etc., pages can take quite a long time before they react to the first user input.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another question. What methodology should I use when lab testing for Core Web Vitals performance?
Okay, so the targets set by Google for LCP, FID, and CLS are based on analysis of the experience of real users on real devices visiting millions of websites. So this takes into account the fact that users are visiting on a variety of device types. And these device types have different capabilities, and they're on different connection speeds. This data includes first visits that do not benefit from browser caching and repeat visits that do benefit from browser caching. So there's a whole mix of connection speeds and device types, and Google's gathering data on all the user experience from those. Now, when lab testing, you need to use the measure total blocking time as a proxy for first input delay. And this is because first input delay is difficult to measure in a lab scenario. So the targets for LCP and total blocking time are different for different test scenarios. For example, desktop versus mobile, and are dependent on the use of specific connection speeds when testing. So the lab testing target for CLS is the same as it is for the real user measurement on any device type, no matter what the connection speed. And this is something that Google does not make clear, and it causes a lot of confusion, even among developers. So if anyone wants specific information about the different targets that you should use when lab testing and the test configurations that you should use, please contact me, because I'm happy to help. So to summarize, to take a kind of global view of the user experience in the wild, Google came up with averages, in a sense, for assessing Core Web Vitals performance. It looks at 75th percentile of user experience. But when you're lab testing, you need to test on a specific device against a specific connection speed. So therefore, in certain circumstances, depending on what device connection speed you're testing on, you need to set different targets for some Core Web Vitals metrics.
Wonderful, thank you. We have one more here. Is there a way that I can test the cumulative layout shift that might happen below the fold?
Yes, any tool that uses Google's Crux dataset as a data source such as Google Search Console, it actually reports on the largest shift window on a page experienced by real users. Now, this is whether it occurred at the top of the page, somewhere in the middle, or at the bottom. And it is possible to emulate scrolling up and down the page in lab testing conditions. But this is a really complex process and will probably require setting up a framework that can actually emulate humans scrolling up and down. And you'd use tools like Puppeteer and Lighthouse to do this. But a simple way to work out what the core web vitals, what's causing core web vitals and where it's happening and what the score is to actually install the Web Vitals extension in your Chrome browser. And you can use this to report on core web vitals on pages as you browse the web and as you scroll up and down.
Great, thank you. We have a couple minutes left, so we don't have any questions typed in yet. So let's just give maybe 30 seconds for everybody, just if there's any last-minute questions anyone has on top of mind before we end the webinar.
Cool.